Thank you for convening this hearing on a matter of vital importance. My name is Ilana Ofgang. I'm a legal fellow at UNITED SIKHS, which is a UN-affiliated NGO that focuses on international civil and human rights advocacy, humanitarian aid, and health and education initiatives for disadvantaged populations, focusing on the Sikh community worldwide. United Sikhs data collection on bullying experiences in the New York Sikh community has included bullying truth commissions and focus groups where young Sikh students aged 6 to 18 have shared their experiences on bullying and reported physical assault, isolation, racial slurs, taunting for wearing their religious head coverings, be it the turban or the patka. They've been insulted or physically assaulted for maintaining long, uncut hair, and they've been labeled as terrorists. Surveys conducted among Sikh students revealed that approximately 60% of Sikh students have experienced bullying, and when broken down by gender, this number rises to almost 70% for Sikh boys. These are not isolated incidents. The Sikh community has experienced a collective trauma from bullying, most notably when Sikh students, out of fear, frustration, and isolation, begin to discard their religious identity. This means that the Sikh community, the youth, is under attack and are underprotected in New York City schools. From what we have seen, from what we have heard, the DOE's efforts to combat bullying, although positive steps in the right direction, has too often failed Sikh students and likely other minority communities as well. Therefore, we are encouraged by the reporting requirements that will be required through the Safe Schools Improvement Act, and accordingly we do support the proposed resolutions at issue today. For bullying prevention policies to be effective, specifically for Sikh students, there must be requirements for any data reporting to include categories for Sikhs, or some kind of generic category in which Sikhs can be identified, so that crucial information documenting this bullying accurately captures the full extent of the impact on the Sikh community. Not only is reporting must be mandatory, but diversity training within the classrooms must be a real and achievable goal, and not only annually. The two main concerns that Sikh students have expressed is this underreporting and lack of follow-up, and also the lack of religious and cultural sensitivity that teachers have towards Sikh students who do break the silence and actually report having been bullied. Teachers must be armed with more than punitive measures in the form of detention and suspension. They must be given tools to learn about the different communities that they teach, the different communities that they have the responsibility to protect. And they need to be able to respond appropriately when a student is bullied because of their faith or perceived affiliation with groups that are often targeted for bias-based harassment. To close, in a post-9/11 environment, Sikh children are not merely compared with cartoon characters or other derogatory things as they were in the past. They're now being labeled as terrorists. This has a devastating impact on a young child's psyche. So we do support your efforts, and we urge you to continue.
Thank you. For United Sikhs, you hit on a topic which I think is really very important. I'm almost ashamed to admit it, but I was a teacher for 25 years. And as the population of my school began to change, I didn't really know the Sikh population, the Hindu population, nor the Muslim population. And I was never offered any training in terms of even just some idea of what Sikh beliefs are, why Sikh children wear a turban, why Muslim children, feel the way that they do, or whatever. Just to, I'm not asking for a teaching of the religion per se, but some type of a education to teachers about the populations that they're teaching. And it has to be ongoing, and it has to be a thorough commitment, as you were saying as well, because, and I'm the chair of the Innovation Committee also, so I'm looking at it from that perspective, because our populations are constantly changing, especially here in New York City. And I think that would also go a long way in terms of creating an environment of multicultural understanding in the schools. I've seen instances in staff rooms where teachers would mock a Sikh child because they're wearing a turban. Or I've heard staff people say, well, why don't they just take the turban off? And as a gay person who's out, I identify very strongly with that because I have an option whether or not to be out, just as a Sikh person has an option to wear the turban or not. And I always say, well, wear the turban, and that's what I try to do in my own, in being an openly gay person, is wear the turban, so to speak, So I think that's a major concern, and I thank you for that, for bringing that up. I just was wondering if anybody has an idea, what do you think is blocking this? What's preventing it from actually happening? I mean, the Chancellor says he has the will, the people who came in to testify today have the will. What is the obstacle?
Do you want to jump in? Because I can use all my time.
Yep.
Not only have the teachers been asked, but what's really helped us in the classroom is involving the students. Because you know what? They're always going to be ahead of us. If we come down on this, they're going to move it over and start bullying people in ways we don't figure out for another 6 months. Make them part of it. Ask them what they think the punishment or the penalty or the reprimand ought to be. Ask them to set the bar for the different kinds of behavior. When you involve them in the process, they're invested in what's happening in their classroom, and they're smarter than all of we are about it. It's happening with them. So again, these are resources we have. When it's just an administrative thing to paste on to do, you can't do it. But when you look at what you have and incorporate all of that, and we just need to somehow get all these groups talking to each other.
And I just want to add, in our program model, again, the girls, when they get to role play and they get to talk about it, they sort of model what's going on, and they do end up feeling empowered to speak up, right? One of the issues is, if you see it happening to somebody else, what would you do? In the start of our program, they'll say, well, I'd be afraid to say anything. But when they have the opportunity to sort of go through these role modeling behaviors and discuss, well, 2 or 3 of you can go talk to somebody. But I will say that, just anecdotally, some of them would say, well, you can go to the teacher, but then nothing will happen, right? So, but I would say empowering the youth and creating an environment which is, one which is day in and day out in every classroom is about respect for all, or civility for all, which then leads to respect, is really critically important. It's part of what I think about is training is great, but what about an overriding philosophy that says, every person in this classroom is treated in a certain way, and we're not going to tolerate any kind of behavior where a certain respect and civility isn't evidenced.
And just to go back to kind of the cultural training, there was a comment earlier to, I believe, the United Teachers Federation about why does the DOE not have a committee of teachers to go to as their kind of first inquiry of how to implement this on the ground. And I would say I would push that similarly and say, why does the DOE not have a task force of parents, students, and members of a diverse community in New York to go to and say, how do we give teachers the tools to address this and be culturally sensitive and respectful in doing so, and understand really the problems, that it's not an option to take the turban off. And so I would say, as a suggestion, NYPD has a hate crimes joint task force. Bullying prevention is hate crimes prevention. We need bullying prevention task forces that involve the communities and advocacy organizations in an ongoing dialogue, not just annually, not just semi-annually, monthly, weekly, whatever it takes to stop what is a real epidemic.
Well, let me thank you for coming in, but I have one quick question. Did any of you see the program last night on Dateline, Channel 4, on bullying? No? Okay. It was interesting. I think you can probably go online and check it out. It's very telling, to say the least. Thank you all for coming in. We appreciate it. Now we're going to hear from our